as far as looking some of the qualities that right now where my company is, that we're looking for bringing people aboard is one, like the analytical thinkers, someone who can, um, step in and help problem solve. And another quality is people who can actually follow systems. We're at a point where we're really focusing on standardizing things, putting, 5Sing, becoming more lean and efficient, and it's tough if you put a systems in place and people don't follow those systems. So, it's even harder when you hiring homeboys that you grew up with, and you like, man, come in every day. I need you to write down the energy consumption daily on this log, and then you come in and it's not done. Or the just all of the systems that you put in place that they just won't follow the systems for whatever reason. So I think just being able to step in place, look at the system, understand the system, know why, and be able to follow it to the T, and also have that real strategic thinking to find ways to actually improve the system as well. So when you're trying to run multiple wings of a company, it's hard to have to think for everybody. So, really just those two qualities would be someone who can follow systems and think analytically enough to come in and help improve those systems. So.
We've got a bunch of different cultures across the different facets of the business. So we have a warehouse culture, we have driver culture, and we have basically the back office culture. Across all of them, what we're looking for are people that are self-starters. I'm a college dropout, but it never stopped me from educating myself and digging in and solving things. I'm looking for people that make mistakes, because if you don't make mistakes, you're not doing something right. But it's how you learn from them, how you communicate when you do screw up, and move on. I'm looking for people that are always growing. So no matter what you're studying, you're digging into stuff, and you have a bigger ambition than where you're at. Because otherwise, we'll never be able to motivate you to keep growing, and we'll never scale our company. So it's super important to find self-starters that do that. And I guess, I don't know if you've ever heard of the 20-60-20 rule. 20% of the company, these people are the best in class. They're sitting in the front row. They're getting straight A's. They're always on time or early. You've got the 60% that are just meeting the requirements and doing a good job. And then you got the bottom 20%. They're late. They don't care. They're not passionate. They're not growing. And so we believe in rotating through. When we see somebody that's in that bottom 20%, we get rid of them and we find another bottom 20% and let them move up. And what you'll see over time is that 60% starts becoming more of that top 20%, and you're going to end up with a better group of people. So I'm looking for people that want to be in that top 20.
I say this from not necessarily a perspective of hiring, but more like partnerships, as far as bringing people onto my team and working alongside them. So adding to the day-to-day, like, management executive type team. I look for communication skills. Communication is so important. Like, if you don't know how to tell me what's going on, or you're afraid to speak up, like, that's not going to help anyone, including you. Dependability. Dependability is huge. Like, I need to be able to call you, or I need to be able to count on you. I need to be able to know that you're going to do what you said you're going to do, because that's going to make the whole ship move forward. And if you can't do that, then that's a problem. And willingness to learn is probably the biggest thing. You have to be able, this industry, like we've been mentioning and everyone's been echoing, is that you have to be agile. You have to know how to pivot. And people that don't want to pivot, that's not going to work with the rest of the team. When everybody has to pivot, everybody got to be on the same page. And if you can't communicate effectively and be dependable, then you most likely also can't pivot. So all of those things are going to work together. And that's really what I look for when adding someone to my team.
Similar to Amber, I'm not at a place where we're hiring employees like that. We're growing our actual team, you know, management and so forth. And so I'm looking for heart. I want people who want to be in it because of the reasons that our mission says, you know, that they're about changing the world and shit. So finding people who are genuinely about that is super important to me. And finding people who have drive and patience. And I think a lot of time in historically oppressed communities, we have no shortage of hustle or drive, but we have a shortage of patience. I heard someone explain the etymology, the breakdown of the word ambition. And essentially it's like serving two masters. It's the belief, it's the drive to get somewhere, and in some ways the belief that you may not get there. And so looking for people who have the drive and equal parts faith and patience and communication. Yeah.
I guess the first thing I would look for, or look for currently, is kind of the elephant in the room, trust, right? I mean, let's make no mistake, we know what industry we're in, right? And so ultimately, the person that you're bringing into your house, you want to make sure you're not bringing a wolf into the hen house, right? Quite a lot of people are trustworthy until they're not trustworthy anymore. And so the first thing you have to do is you have to kind of go with your gut instinct. If you get a bad vibe, then that's not a person you want on the team. The second thing is, like a lot of the panelists have said, is communication. Communication costs nothing but time. And so if you can't communicate effectively or learn how to communicate, then you're really serving me or the company or yourself very little good. And then I guess the third thing I would look for is really flexibility. As an owner, you know, I'm in there scrubbing toilets. And so if I can do it when it's the toilets I'm not using 9 times out of 10, if I can meet with distributors, if I could, you know, show up to functions and I could constantly work, I kind of expect you to as well. Now, obviously, there's a disconnect from I'm the owner and I stand to benefit if it works out, you know, and you're just an employee. But that being said, an employee that comes in that's telling me from the beginning of what they won't do, more than likely you won't work here. And so, you know, there has to be that level of commitment from both management and the executives and the workforce. And so those are, I guess, the 3 things I would look for.
So we are kind of looking at broadening our overall team and employees. And one, you have to want to be there. If you don't believe in what you're selling or you don't believe in what you're doing, you're not going to do it well. And in this industry, there's no time for that. So one, I want to have people on the team that really want to be there. They're not just doing it because, you know, it's a job. That's not going to, trust me, it's not going to be just a job. I also look for people, obviously communication, willingness to listen to each other and understand there's so much to learn. We are all babies in this industry, even us, like all of us. Even though we've gone through it, there's so much more to learn, so much more to do. It's very humbling to know that, you know, you have friends that you can also rely on and ask, you know, can you help me out? So that willingness to be able to work together, be able to change processes fast. If someone doesn't move fast from like one type of a thing to another, that's not gonna work here. You have to be able to adapt. And then culture. You wanna be able to laugh with your employees and with your partners. It is like a family. We're building an industry right now. This becomes family. So people you really want to be around, and for you also as people who are coming on to really want to learn something from the people that have been there, and for us to learn something from people that are coming in. There's so many things that people do that I can't do. So my goal is to help fill those gaps and put in people who really are good at what they do. Yes. So our goal was to really allow and help people in the industry, anyone, be able to find a path to the industry, whether it be starting their own business and having a turnkey license, or wanting to come and learn what cannabis is, but actually with the plant. Right now with regulations, it's very difficult. This is amazing, and it would be so great if we can have someone flower, and like if there was if Nina wanted to do like a flower session, right, and really talk about the plant and all the different ways you can manufacture it. So the S license. S licenses basically gives you the ability to come use the machines on an hourly basis, but it is a state license. So our goal is to be able to allow as many people as we can to, you know, have the opportunity to be their own business or have the opportunity to learn. So it is a state registered license, and you have to have a shared use facility to be able to provide those S-type licenses. So what we did is we registered most of our licenses as shared use so that we can bring in a lot of S licenses.
All right. So I'm pretty sure you guys have some questions in the crowd for folks, because I know everyone in the room is very, like, has their own specific area that they're interested in. Does anybody have specific questions for any of the panelists based on your own interest?
This lady right here, and I'm saying to myself, you look so familiar, right? And then I heard this gentleman say your name, and I just typed in Jennifer in my Facebook. And so I said, yeah, so then I said, Jennifer Johns. And I said to myself, over the years, I've heard your name, and people have tried to introduce us, but it's never happened. And it wasn't meant to happen then. It was meant to happen now. So my name is Shelly Tatum. Right. And so, right, music. And so right. No, but I just had to say that because I'm like, I recognize her face. But, so I'm going to talk to you afterwards. So Amber, you said that you started using, trying different things for medical reasons. So in reference to lupus, I have a dear loved one who has lupus, and she's been living with lupus for about 30 years. So what have you experimented from a medicinal standpoint to help you with lupus?
So when I moved to California, I was really sick. I actually got I was taking big doses of prednisone just so that I could make the move and be able to physically get out here. And so I was really messed up when I got here. It took me about 6 months to stabilize, and I was on a regimen of full extract cannabis oil. So it's the stuff that comes in a tube. Yes, like Rick Simpson oil, but it's full extract cannabis oil. So it's made from Everclear, basically. Everclear distilled down with cannabis, and it turns into this real thick kind of tarry like oil, and it's ingestible. You know, it's really potent, strong, but that and topicals, yeah, and it tastes terrible. So I would, but I got used to the taste. You know, it gets you extremely high. It's potent, but the thing is that it captures a full spectrum of cannabinoids from your starting material. So whereas if we're talking about regular hash, you know, it's taking bits and pieces of the full cannabinoid content of cannabis. So full extract oil is capturing it all, and it's like seen as the most beneficial way to ingest cannabis. And so that, along with topicals, you know, salve, taking Epsom salt baths infused with cannabis. Those kinds of things really, really helped.
Anybody else have questions? Let me get you the mic so we can capture this.
For the delivery, non-storefront retail, which products would you recommend, and how many products do you recommend starting with? Or what can you get away with starting with?
Pass it over. Adolf. I would say to really think about how much money you got to start with first, because that's going to determine your budget is going to determine what your launch looks like. So, for instance, I have a non-storefront retailer license, but my budget is like this. So I'm not launching a traditional delivery service because that's going to take too much capital. I don't have money to buy cars and staff all these people and also buy all that product. So I'm doing a subscription box service where we've got scheduled deliveries. We can control our staffing a bit better. We don't have to have all these vehicles. We're running around making all these deliveries every day. It's just but that's just a baby steps into it. Like for anything, you should think about it that way. Baby steps into things. Get your foot in the door. Don't try to break the door down and get in there, because that's how you go broke. This is a marathon, not a race. And the one who spends the least is gonna win. The folks that spend the least are gonna win. You got Flocana. They just raised $125 million, but they're losing over $1 million a month. You know, so I mean, these types of things, like MedMen running around, making all this money, spending all this money, not making all this money, spending all this money. You got all these companies running around reporting these insane losses. This is not sustainable. Okay, and ain't nobody gonna give us all that unlimited capital to run off of. So we have to spend smarter. This is a marathon, not a race. Yes, scheduled deliveries is a way for you to better manage your staffing, and not just that, your inventory, the cars that's needed, the infrastructure that's needed to push the business.
So basically, she's saying you have to listen to a lot of Nipsey Hussle constantly because the marathon continues. So,
I mean, I think it probably kind of depends upon your scenario. If you can, though, strategic alliances are probably your best friend. Strategic partnerships. Try to team up with cultivators, distributors, manufacturers that are looking for shelf space that you can provide them. Doing the type of arrangement like my man has with other platforms like Ease, that also can kind of help soften the blow. But you, like she said, you really want to think wise and strategic. If you're kind of just starting out and you're non-operational, you're kind of gauging what the customers are going to want. The customers are not very loyal, so they will abandon you quickly. And so retail is kind of one of the most overregulated aspects of the industry currently. Once you get the product, it's yours. It can't flow backwards to distribution. You cannot give it back. And so once you get it, you're stuck with it. And so you want to ensure that you can sell it, because ultimately you'll sit on, large amounts of inventory that are stagnant. And so ultimately you want to try to get as much information as you can about your customers, know your customer, but strategic alliances, vertical integration or mock vertical integration is very important.
I also just wanted to add, read the laws. There's you can have $5,000 of product in your car, and a certain percent, and talk to your lawyers, a certain percent can be pre-ordered, and that's 2,000, and then 3,000 can be on demand. So those 3,000, be strategic about it, right? Figure out what products your target audience really goes towards. So don't just buy kind of randomly. Really understand and find your own target group that you're like, okay, moms, I'm going to be servicing this area. Moms need their Slav, we need our tinctures, our joints, whatever. You know what I mean? We need all of it. But yeah, basically really know who if you have patients and customers already, carry what they want. That more likely to stay your patient.
And I also want to add that, last year, delivery was bottom of the totem pole, so it was extremely hard to even find product. Now there's the stats are something like there's one retailer to every 10 cultivators and one retailer to every 2 distributors. Just because a distributor calls you doesn't mean you have to take the product now. Your phones will get bombarded, your emails will get bombarded with distributors. Fill them out. See who has the product you're really looking for. See who has the terms you can live with. But don't just take whatever comes your way, because it will come.
It's dead. Oh, there we go. I'd mentioned that really understanding like the target area you're going to be in. So in San Francisco, our average spend is twice of that of Oakland, right? And we look at it from a category product mix, where we have the top shelf, you could say, the middle of the ground, and then the price sensitive products. And so you go into each category and make sure that, depending on where you're at, because there's no reason to stock cases if nobody's going to order it in your target region. So I'd be really thoughtful about that. The most painful stuff we've had in the last 12 months is how much stuff wasn't compliant along the way as the regulations were shifting, and we've had to destroy so much cannabis it breaks my heart. Or I consumed a lot of it, but just make sure it's labeled right. And if you get terms from a distributor, that's great. It'll help you. Always pay on time so you don't lose those lines of credit with those distributors, because that's what you're going to build your book of business. And if find a distributor, it covers the whole, all the tiers. So the less people you have to deal with, the easier it is to run your business. Same way for everything. Like, we can only talk to so many people a day, right? That's time is our biggest limit. So.
I would really encourage, King, for you to, one of the reasons I got a vertically integrated business model is because I would encourage that you create your own product as well. Push your own, like believe in yourself and push your brand, because what you're gonna find is, like you said, it won't be a shortage of people knocking on your door to get shelf space, but you want to own your own means of production. What I found is our first product that we launched was a smoke and art box. And it's 3.5 grams. We support local artists, all these different initiatives we do with the Smoke and Art Box. I started to get accounts, got into the dispensary, and most of the dispensaries, they have a house brand. So like if you go in Eco, they have Eco flower. If you go in Blunts and More, they have Blunts and More flower. So with that, they have they have the ability, because they're growing themselves, they're growing their own products or creating their own products, that they can play with the profit margins. They got way higher profit margins, so play with that and lower their prices a little bit. If you have a product and a product only with no shelf space, or you don't have control of any shelf space, then you're at the mercy of the retailer, and vice versa. If you're doing retail only, you're kind of at the mercy of the distributors and the manufacturers. So if you want to really be able to stay in the game and be able to play with, have some flexibility in your profit margins, like start thinking about developing your own product, whether it's a pre-roll, whether it's grow or some sort of manufacturing. That way, you not only are you just selling everybody else stuff, you selling your own stuff. You know what I mean? So I would really encourage to create your own product as well to put in your delivery. Yeah.
So much game. What's up, Ivan? What you got?
Hello, my name's Ivan. This is a question for topical and the testing. Right now we have a pain salve that we make in the kitchen. Our challenge is making it compliant. So I know Nina mentioned about other ingredients that you use, like strawberries that would come up as pesticides. Right now we use a beeswax, and I know Papa and Barley went through the same thing, where all the trials and errors of their ingredients that they use. So when I'm looking into the ingredients that we use for our pain salve, we're getting certificate of authenticity. Do we have to test that before we make the product, and then after we have to test the final product as well? But then also the challenge is that I talked to Anoresco here, the testing in Bayview, and they said they can't test unless I have a license already. So I'm in the R&D stage. So how can I get through that? What are the challenges to get through that?
So like testing is also really expensive, right? So in being able to develop a product, understanding where a business would have to actually put out that expense, right? Also.
So you can. So I've seen a lot of people jump through a lot of. Jump through. Can you guys hear me? I've seen people jump through a lot of hoops buying really expensive organic ingredients trying to get their final product to pass, and it's very expensive. The best thing to do is to take the raw materials and get it tested at the laboratory. Now, if you use, a lot of labs think they can take advantage of their clients. This happens a lot because this industry hasn't had to do this kind of testing. If you sell a house, you got to get the soil checked out for lead so that if they build a playground, the kids don't have lead poisoning. I mean, these things are more anchored in other industries. The people who run a lot of the cannabis businesses are interacting with these labs or interacting with a laboratory for the first time. You could or should be able to get free testing. If they want to keep you as a testing client, you should say, listen, you're not gonna have stuff to test if I don't have a compliant system coming out the door. So don't forget to remind your laboratory that you guys are really kind of in a partnership. If you are producing a bunch of stuff and it's going to the shelves and it's being bought, then the lab's doing okay because they're getting paid for testing your samples along the way. If you have a supply chain problem, they don't have any work to do for a while either. And so, there's ways to negotiate. If you can't negotiate, though, just use some logic. It's about $1,000 for a full COA test. So if you're just doing pesticides, that's one of the 8, but really it's there's 5 or 6 that are really big tests. It shouldn't cost more than a couple $100 to do a pesticide-only test. And as for the licensing stuff, no, the labs are all allowed to do R&D. Some call it research and development, some call it quality assurance. But if you're not generating a certificate of analysis that says this is compliant and ready to be sold, it's really between you and the laboratory, and it's private. And so it's not really regulated by the BCC, and you can negotiate the price or whatever. But yeah, know your rights as a client of a testing laboratory. Another thing that you should be able to do is audit them to make sure that the results are accurate, and that's a little more complicated. But if you're paying someone for information, and you say, how do I know this information's any good? If they're in the business of selling you data, they should defend their data. And if you're not getting that response, you may want to consider finding a lab that's a little more, got more of that customer service bent to it. But yeah, definitely test everything directly because it's just a simple loop. Whatever instrument they're going to use to do your COA, if it doesn't detect it, then you're good. So best thing is to pre-test little batches of ingredients and try to negotiate it down so that they're not, charging you an arm and a leg.
Could you define COA for people?
Sure.
Some of the acronyms are super new.
Absolutely. Sorry about that. Yeah, so the COA is Certificate of Analysis, and that's in the law where it says every batch that goes to a dispensary shelf. It's really at the distributor. If you're on the distributor shelf, that's where tax money's owed on it, but it happens when the lab test happens. And that's where the THC % of the batch and all these other pieces of information that when you're growing on a farm are still just speculated. You don't know exactly how you can weigh it, but that's about it. And so the COA is the stamp that's okay, this is officially a financial commodity now, and now you can move it around legally. And so there's a lot of tests before the COA testing, which we called R&D or QA, and that's just to see, okay, is my THC where it should be, or do I have a pesticide problem, or can I use this as an ingredient? And those would be non-COA tests.
Oh, hold on. What? Right here. I was gonna say. That happened last time too. I was gonna say that Felipe can answer that question on as far as the accountability on testing in distribution, right? So where do they find that?
I was going to say Section 5307 of the quality assurance process in the Business and Professions Code. So if you just go to cannabis.ca.gov, click on regulations, go to the BCC, click on that first set of rulemaking that just passed, and when you look at those final regulations, hit Control F or Command F on a Mac and just type in 5307.
Also, keep in mind, I think Nina said, that this industry has been existing for 20 years, but it's brand new. Testing facilities are even newer. There was one city in the entire state that mandated testing prior to 2018, which was Berkeley. No other product or no other city actually had a requirement that ensured testing. And so the testing laboratories are still in their infancy, You know, we just had a really big scandal a few months ago about a lab that let a lot of product through the lab and passed it for pesticides, and apparently their pesticide machine was broke for about 5 months. And so also hold these labs very accountable. Like he said, question them, ask for audits. There is still no standardization, and so you can take samples to different labs and still get different results. And so keep in mind that the lab portion of this industry is brand new. Also keep in mind that the testing standards for cannabis exceeds anything else you'll put in your body in California. Your cannabis is now mandated to be cleaner than your food. Another problem that's happening right now are that vape cartridges are coming back testing positive for heavy metals. It's not what's in them, it's the product that they're made of. No one knows how long the product can be in the vape cart before there's seepage of these metals, and so we'll see a lot of this stuff happening. We're seeing zigzags fail pesticides or fail testing for heavy metals, and so ultimately this will become very problematic. There are less than 50 labs in the entire state to service over, I think, 12,000 actual companies, and so this will be something that will evolve. But like he said, test everything.
Something to that real quick. I'm a pre-roll manufacturer, right? Yeah, I'm a pre-roll manufacturer, and I don't know if anybody else in here makes pre-rolls, but all of the raw cones kind of disappeared off of the market for a while, and it's because they were testing positive for heavy metals. So make sure that when you hit up these manufacturers that make these products, like even papers, that they're passing the heavy metals test.
A very prominent gummy brand that we work with kept failing testing, and we were selling them the oil, and we were baffled. We're like, how does this keep happening? It was failing with off-the-chart pesticides. And so we decided to send all of their ingredients to the labs, and we found that the organic sugar brand that they were using was absolutely not organic at all. So you literally need to test all the organic ingredients that you sell, because a lot of companies are lying in the food industry. There's nobody really coming in and checking on them. So I'd just be wary of that.
I just remembered something hearing my fellow panelists speak down here, making a really good point about how there's a lot of variation from one lab to another. We've talked to a lot of people about this. They're like, how do I know? You know, I give out the same test to different labs. The answers are different. Now, obviously, one of them's accurate, and the others are getting further away from it. And we have, like, really no confidence. I mean, unless you just intimately know the labs personally, you don't know which one to trust. There is a great resource out there. Do you guys know what proficiency testing is? It's called PT rounds sometimes, but in other lab industries, they do this thing where they take a blind sample. Like, you know, if you're a lab, remember I was talking earlier about testing lead under the soil of a house before you sell it. Those labs that do that lead test get sent out by the government or some regulatory body a blind lead sample. And no one knows how much is in it, and they all have to report back the answer. And then the results are posted, kind of like a audition or like a test scores for like a big test. It all gets posted, and you can look it up. So the cannabis industry has one that's run by Emerald Scientific. And so they charge the labs to participate. And so you, as the lab's client, it's just a free resource they publish. They do it spring, fall every year. So I think you can look up the 2 results from 2018. They're published. But what it will show you is what was the real number, what are the number that the lab reported, and where are they close to the deviation or the mean. And so you can kind of use that to kind of, is a roadmap to say which ones do I trust more and who's more accurate, and it'll help you get a sense of which labs are giving you accurate numbers and which ones are kind of way off. Yeah, it's proficiency testing, often called PT testing, and Emerald Scientific has a report that they've been doing for the last couple of years, twice a year.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because since like you've heard, there's still a lot of need for standardization in lab testing. However, if it's not lab testing, it doesn't pass and it doesn't get onto the shelves, right? So it's a very important area for us to continue. Sorry, my camera guy. To continue to hold that part of the industry super accountable, because they're gatekeepers, right, of whether or not your product hits the shelf space.
Nothing serious, just that I was a food justice activist for a really long time, and I am not at all surprised that if you're blending cannabis with something food related, organic just means that you can't blend certain pesticides together. It doesn't actually mean that it's good for you. And in many cases in the food industry, your local farmers and things like that have of getting to the shelf because they can't just afford that category, right? And so yet another opportunity for us to work with our communities and source local materials that are not cannabis materials, because many times you're going to find that they are cleaner materials than this non-organic, organic sugar madness. Just saying.
All right, so my name is Perry Jones. I'm the CEO of Joe RS. I'm a verified equity applicant here in San Francisco. I'm a business owner, and I own 100% of my business. So I also just basically, I want to say this is an amazing panel that you got. And I want to thank everybody for the support. You know what I mean, and to OCG, everything that you do. Raymond, I appreciate y'all. For me, being able to see, I mean, such black entrepreneur women, because my main backbone is my mom. My mom is my main business partner, my main backbone, and she the one that seen me go through my trials and tribulations, coming to see me at visits for me being locked up numerous times for weed. So as far as the war on drug, I am a war on drugs in many different ways. And by you guys being here today, you guys are playing a big combative role in it, because you guys are role models. Like me, I usually sit in the think tank. Like, this take a lot of time with me being an entrepreneur and coming up, because I funded my own business. I did everything on my own, hired my own lawyer, worked closely with. I mean, this takes a lot of work for me. It took a lot of sacrifice. I had to cut a lot of people off. I had to cut a lot of way of thinking off. But I also had to apply a lot of the things that I knew from the streets to put it into business. As my mom said, you go for what you know. You go for what you know, and you apply your resources properly. So in other words, just want to tell you guys, thank you for what you guys do. Every one of you guys is a working component. For me, I mean, I wanted to actually do some more paperwork at home today pertaining to my business, but I felt as though I just, you know what I mean, I needed to come to this right here because it's rejuvenating for me to be able to see this. I also work in juvenile hall too. So I also represent, and I'm giving a representation to those faces and those kids that's locked up, probably never coming home again, to be here to represent that, because they don't know that y'all here. They don't know that these type of programs exist. And for me to be able to relay that back to them is very powerful. As I say, it's like a Harriet Tubman thing. The work that you guys are doing, this is an underground thing, it's a black market, and you guys are taking it to another level. So me coming behind you guys is an honor, and I'm pretty sure that you get tiring. You guys go through a lot. I've been doing this for like the last 6 months in managing, being a full-time father, having a career, and also doing this, graduated from Oakland, working closely with applicants. So I see this more as a civil rights movement. This is my civil rights. For me not to be penalized and be shot down and get killed or murdered or incarcerated any furthermore. So me being here today, I mean, this is a civil standing right. So I want y'all to look at it like that too, and also to think about the guys that are locked up in prison. I remember the last class that we had at Oakland, one thing that I took from that class, Heather said, when you leave here, you just realize we're soldiers, and we all are in debt to those that's locked up. So just keep that in mind.
Thank you. More question.
Yo, my name is Detox or Daenerys, but you guys talked a lot about partnerships, and we have a lot of entrepreneurs here. And I think when you had the map up there, it showed that the cannabis space is a lot of different business models. It's a ton of different businesses. And can you explain to the people here, because you guys have talked about how important partnerships are, your advice on navigating those business-to-business relationships that are mandatory, like it's the only way to survive. We call them partnerships in the real world, but really this is like exists in the business community. So it's a B2B, it's sales, it's partnerships. Can you give your advice on how you guys navigate that?
Great question.
They will have more like technical detail things and so forth and so on. As a musician and in the cannabis industry, what I've learned again with historically oppressed communities is that contracts scare people. Contracts are the best way to say I love you. It is the best way to say I love you. You know what I mean? Like a handshake and this, that, and so forth and so on in the streets was useful when you couldn't do all of these things, right? When it was against your better interest to write it down. But after every phone call with someone, whether it's finished and finalized business, it's a great practice to send a memorandum afterwards, right? To be like, this is the conversation that I recall us having. Do you think this is what we said? In an email, right? Then it's written down. So then when you go back and it's time to negotiate those terms, you're able to say, okay, so initially we thought maybe this would work. Are we pivoting from that space now and saying that maybe this is a better look? And you have a record of that thing. And the more that we start doing that with each other, the more comfortable we'll be in doing that with each other. And it won't feel like a lot of times my brothers will be working on stuff, and the idea of a contract when they don't understand what's happening feels like that person's trying to fuck them over, right? And so, I mean, like, and I'm the one in the room that's always talking about the soft skills, because our trauma around systems as people of color is a real thing that has to be dealt with compassion and slowly. Like, the patience to not pop off at the white dude who got the investment dollars and shit like that, that's one thing. But not popping off at your people who are trying to grow with you is 12 times more important. So write it down and say I love you with a signature on it.
So I have a manufacturing and distribution company as well as a non-storefront retailer license. They're all separate. It's not a micro business. But Adolph is my equity partner in Oakland. And so our agreement is that he is going to make my deliveries for my subscription box. But then some of the things I'm thinking, okay, well then how can I help Adolph? Retailers don't necessarily want to have a bunch of product on hand. Like, it's really expensive to have product in your inventory. And so I'm hoping that my distribution company can offset some of the burden for him carrying his products, you know, instead of having a 14-day supply of products. Maybe we can cut that down to 7, so he can come and pick up at our facility every 7 days versus every 14, and extending some better terms. So just when you're thinking about partnerships, think about your friends that are and where they're at in the supply chain, and how you can both leverage each other's what you have to help each other.
I would mention also being very aware of what to expect from the partnership. Keeping track of, this is bad, people say don't be binary about stuff, but there are a lot of partnerships that sometimes they're just not healthy. So really studying what that person, what their values are, and the biggest piece of a partnership is how you navigate the challenging times, because shit's gonna go wrong. And so how you work through that, how you communicate through that, if everybody's making best efforts. The best partnerships I've had, we've gone through the biggest challenges of our lives, and we work through them, and that's how I know they're good partners. And it's not always a take. Sometimes, you know, you'll do something for them, and eventually that favor will come back around, and if it doesn't in the future, then that's probably not a partner you want. So look for people that are loyal.
I guess, you know, those partnerships are super important. And in my situation, from my experience, what I found is, you know, first of all, stepping into it as an equity applicant, it's almost like this box. And when you go and form partnerships, naturally, you want to take advantage of, like, you'll see a more successful company or a bigger company, and they may present an opportunity to you. And let's just keep it real. No matter how good you are at negotiating, how calm you are, you know, how diplomatic you are, they're never going to look at you as an equal. You know, they don't feel like you have the right to sit at the same spot at the table with them. So what I would suggest is look to the folks that are next to you. Like look at the folks that, you know, like that have a delivery from a grassroots delivery or a grassroots cultivator or a grassroots manufacturer, and form those alliances, and then believe in yourself. Because, you know, I'm incubated by Jetty, which is a really big company. And, you know, I really don't expect nothing out of my incubator other than what's required for him of the equity program. So, you know, one of the things that I did to try and leverage to get something is I asked him to mentor me. I said, hey, you know, hey, could you kind of mentor me a little bit through this? And he was like, oh, man, he was surprised to hear me ask him that. But that's all I really expect out of him, being such a big company, having, you know, 75 to 100 employees. I not in a million light years would I expect him to give me any kind of leg up outside of the actual equity program. And a lot of the businesses, these larger companies, they're going to come and they're going to see you as a delivery service driver and then try and propose some sort of, like, you know, no matter how you cut it, it's a whack ass deal. You know what I'm saying? And it's a deal, and they're going to try and convince you that you're not capable. They're going to try and convince you that, you know, you belong in the cotton field. So, you know, with that being said, like, leverage those cats that's around you, and then y'all bind together. And even if it's creating a vertically integrated business model with 3 other guys, so he's the cultivator, he's the distributor, and you're the retailer, but y'all eat out the same pot. You know what I mean? Write one business plan and y'all eat out the same pot because you move stronger together. So my advice would be, you know, leverage those around you, even if they ain't got as much as that big company, because at that point you're a force to be reckoned with. You know what I mean?
And specifically to black men, y'all built this thing, right? And the whole fucking world wants to be you. You create and lead culture around the world. So again, they need you more than you need them. And the more that you know that, the more powerful you are. And the more of us that are in these spaces that know that, the more equitable the industry will continue to be for the generations that come behind us, right? But it is about confidence. This is a spiritual process, opportunity, transformation moment, right? Like, you know, and we can go down the way of tech, right, and be excluded, or we can really stand up and be counted and know that we built this industry, you know. So when we open every cell in Attica and send them to Africa, and on their way to Africa they decide they want to create their business, right, that we are doing it in such a way that is not about here's a leg up, but here's back the shit that you created. Just saying.
To build upon what my man said is the vertical integration thing is real big. I mean, ultimately, everyone won't have the resources to kind of have everything contained. And so the partnerships that I spoke of earlier will be different for everyone and for each and every scenario, but they should exist whenever possible. Like you said, if that person has cultivation and that person has distribution and you have retail, it only makes sense for you guys to come together because you can potentially see higher margins that way. What we're looking at, and we've looked at being operators for all of 2018, this is turning into excluding those people who are very well funded and have resources. It's consolidate or die. All of us are now fighting against Canadian investors and Chinese investors and people from the East Coast, and ultimately they're very well funded, they're prepared, and as I think Amber said earlier, their burn rate is ridiculous. They can afford to lose 20, 30 million a year and still get another 100 million in investment. That's not most of us. And so without consolidation, without us working together, we don't stand a chance. Another problem that we have as people of color, specifically men of color, we can all have been in the same room 10 times, and none of us will say anything to each other. We'll look at each other across the room and keep it pushing. That alone does most of us more of a disjustice than anything else. We have to learn to kind of to break the ice, to remove ourselves from that comfort zone and to start to network and work with each other and people that don't look like us. The one advantage that we have over these corporate players is they don't understand the cannabis culture yet. It won't take long for that to happen. You know, it won't take long for some of us to start to work for them, to explain to them what cannabis culture is. So we're literally blowing our head start. So we have to start working together regardless of what that looks like. So paperwork, contracts, they are your friend. This entire industry, not just being a person of color, but being in the weed industry, you know, nothing was documented. Everything was kept in here, right? Everything needs to be documented. As a retailer, you are wise to have a contract with your distributor. What happens if you get a return from a customer? Will he accept it back? What are the terms? What are the payment terms? As Jennifer said, memos, just jotting things down, but having a reference point. There's a reason that the law actually mostly insists that certain types of agreements or contracts are written. It's not just so that, you know, to make everyone feel better, it's to have an actual reference point. Get as much as you can documented because it will save you in the long run. Ask your suppliers for, you know, whatever kind of documentation they have. Check the license numbers as often as possible. Make sure they're not expired because ultimately you hold more liability than you think. Yeah, everyone. Oh, Flocana. Or I don't think I mentioned one. Somebody. So vertical integration just means that you have different aspects of the supply chain. So let's say you make a product, you distribute a product, but you're also a retailer. You are vertically integrated. You can keep it all in-house. But most of us won't have the opportunity to do that. So do what I call mock vertical integration. If you're a retailer, and this man right here is a distributor, and this man is a cultivator, you guys can pretend you're, like he said, you're one company. He grows it, he gets it to him, he gets it to you. You guys got a contained triangle that you don't ever have to worry about product because he's going to make sure you got it. He don't ever have to worry about where it's going because you're going to sell it. Now, all three of you can cohesively try to drive sales.
Honestly, I couldn't have said it better myself. It is about leaving your ego at the door, coming in and being so vulnerable and saying, this is what I can do, this is what I can't do, you know, like almost like signs. Who wants to, you know, fill the gaps, sit, talk, see if there's some kind of, you know, relationship building. This industry is all about partnerships. We all possibly do similar things, but there's ways that we can all partner and all grow to beat all the big industries. Because the people that are here, they love what they do, they know what they do, and they want to be here. People that just want money, it's not going to work that way.
Yeah, because most of us doing it for free right now.
Did you guys at this end have anything? Cool.
I was just going to add for the partnership aspect, one successful strategy that I've found is that any partnership that I'm going into, I identify value, I identify my value, what I bring to the table, what I know that I can do. That way that once I've identified it, there's no way that you're talking me out of it. And that's a very strong piece because a lot of us are just coming to these tables without identifying the strong parts that, you know, we actually bring to the table. And there's a lot of things that aren't necessarily business acumens that you can bring to the table that'll still provide value. So I just suggest, like, you know, just trying to find whatever value and whatever circumstance you're in, because that's like very important when you get to that table.
Just on the partnerships and B2B, over the years, I've seen crazy stuff in this industry that I wouldn't expect from other industries. I've seen, just from the lab testing side, I've seen bad results, batch fails, the cultivator, you know, blames the lab, tries to sue the lab, distributor sues cultivator. I mean, I've seen it go every which way, and it never seems like it's going to happen. I think someone said this earlier. It never seems like it's going to happen until it does, and then you're there. It's kind of like you have this relationship, you're building, it's going great, and then something happens, and now it's flipped. And so everything in writing everything you can do in writing, and keeping records of everything, meticulous records of what you do with your time for the agreement. If you're supposed to do X, Y, and Z, have a record of everything you were doing, have records of emails, all this stuff, because it's very useful when you come to a dispute and something goes wrong. It's basically a lengthy, patient process of getting a lawyer and having the right documents. And so just even if it's not an official document, just try to keep records of everything in writing, and you know, hope for the best. Try not to take it personally, but like these things fall apart when you least expect them, and it happens all the time.
So just for the sake of time, and I know that I told a lot of the panelists that I would have them out of here at a certain time point because I know you guys got things to do today. Can we give a huge round of applause for our entire panel? Awesome. So we're talking about building partnerships, right? So continue to build partnerships, right, is to partake into some tree and some tacos. So we still have this space for a little bit more time. The tacos are free. Go ahead, grab yourself. Continue to oh. Okay, also in your folders there is an orange piece of paper that has a heart weed key on it, right? So anything that you guys want other people to know, if you guys like something that there's prompts on the keys, so just write something down, give it to me. It's a great way for us to continue the knowledge pushing forward, each one teach one. So thank you all. Yes.
So just so you know, also all of this material will be available on the website, and a lot of the presentation will be available on the website. So don't feel like if you didn't get any information that you don't have access to it. The links are in your workbooks, and all this information will be available for you to look over. Even some of the videos, we'll be posting those videos so that if you missed a part of the panel or you want to go back and retrain it, all that stuff will be available to you guys to kind of go over at your own time. So enjoy it, and thank you guys for coming out.